Welcome into Raptors Today, the first episode of the 2023 calendar year. That's Paul Jones, that's Sherm Hamilton, I'm Akil Augustine. And the Toronto Raptors, unfortunately, could not kick off the season the way they started. They ended last year, of course, with a big win against the Phoenix Suns. They fall to 16-21 in a tough matchup against the Indiana Pacers that saw the starters ball out, but really not much contributions from the bench. I'll start with Sherm Hamilton. Your initial takeaways from the first game of this calendar year for your Toronto Raptors?
Well, I thought they had a solid start to the game, which is something that they struggled with towards the end of the last calendar year in terms of being consistent in the first quarter. I thought they were aggressive. They made a lot of plays in the paint. They didn't settle, although they knocked down 6 threes in that first quarter. I thought that they were a sound team, and that's something that, they had struggled with. Then the rest of the game happened. and you have to tip your hat to Indiana. They're a good basketball team. They continually punish the Raptors in the paint. Their bench was phenomenal, led by the Benedict.
Yes. Shout out to Montreal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we saw was some of the things that continue to plague them. Off the dribble, they struggle to keep people in front of them. And a team like Indiana that has multiple guards that want to put pressure on your paint, it becomes a nightmare. And I thought in the third quarter we saw the semblance of a Raptor team that defensively looked like they were completely engaged in terms of their rotations, in terms of their activity, in terms of just that mano-a-mano desire to keep the ball in front of them. And they did a much better job in the third quarter. But Indiana's persistence, Indiana's ability to stick with what they know, how they've become successful this season, they just turned it on late in the fourth quarter and got the job done. So I saw some positives from the Raptors for the first game against a quality team, but you still saw some of the flaws that have plagued them throughout the course of this season in general in terms of their ability to maintain and control the basketball off the dribble.
A lot of that had to do with the second unit. TJ McConnell, of course, and, of course, the Benedict, as Sherm mentioned, really took over, and the Raptors couldn't muster anything coming from their second unit.
It was interesting because I thought in every quarter they did start the first quarter well, and they're a team that over the course of the season has, on average, lost every first quarter. The Raptors are, like I believe, for the numbers people, a -1 or a -2 in first quarters. They won the first quarter. They didn't close the quarter well, but they won the quarter. And I saw over the course of the second, third, and fourth quarters, at some point, Sherm talks about the team being engaged. At some point, I saw them put it together for brief moments where they would go on a run. They had the lead in every one of those quarters at some point, and they played well. They just couldn't sustain it. Again, to Sherm's point, Indiana's a really good team. Tyrese Halliburton's an all-star. I mean, this year we've already seen where he's had 4 games, 15 points, 10 assists, no turnovers. The record in the NBA is 5 in a year. He's got 4 already. So this whole thing with he and Alan Hahn and the wannabe all-star thing, no, the kid's on a team that is holding a playoff spot. They're exceeding the expectations that some people had for them at the beginning of the year. And to me, he's an all-star. If I had a vote, their playoff team, he's one of their leaders, he'd get a vote. Their bench, Akil, to your point, is a group that has clearly defined roles. When they come in as a unit, and there was midway into the second quarter, maybe a couple minutes in, Rick Carlisle had 5 bench guys out there. There was no hybrid unit like, 3 bench guys and a couple stars. He had 5 bench guys on the floor. And those guys functioned terrifically as a unit. They all knew exactly what they were supposed to do. McConnell, to Sherm's point, putting pressure on the paint. Mathurin, scoring. Jalen Smith, just being the garbage guy down there, presenting himself. Rebounding. Everybody, it's like, here's your task card. You do this. Here's your task card. And that doesn't surprise me with Rick Carlisle. I mean, Dwayne Casey used to do that, and he came from that school. So I just think Indiana's bench is a well-functioning unit where everybody understands their roles. And they've had confidence instilled in them by Rick Carlisle. Some of those guys are out there when it's important.
All right, well, that was a story for the Pacers. Obviously, Rick Carlisle spoke very highly of his second unit. And We talk about the bench, but we're going to turn our lens to like the silver linings playbook a bit, because one guy who's been under a lot of scrutiny is Scotty Barnes. NBA players have been coming to his defense with this fan base, talking about the fact that it takes time and you don't really understand the demands on a young man like this. But as our producer Jake mentioned, this was his best game of the year, sure, of 2023, the calendar
January
year.
2nd. Okay.
But 23 points for Scotty Barnes. Your impressions of what the young man did? Didn't shoot a lot of threes, which is something they kind of leave for him, but he really impressed upon us fans, what that ceiling is.
Well, we kind of have an idea of what we've seen from Scotty and know what he can do in terms of how good he is when he puts it all together. To Scotty's defense, second-year player is going to have their ups and downs. He hasn't been healthy the whole season, and he struggled. And it was interesting. Early in the game,
he was doing
the way that Miles Turner was defending him, literally 10 to 15 feet off of him, standing almost in the paint.
Yep.
Well, not almost, deep in the paint he was. And Scotty wasn't even looking at the rim. And I've always said when Scotty is aggressive offensively, as a young player, I find that the rest of his game comes together very fluidly. And for some reason, he wasn't looking at the rim. We found out later the tape on the wrist had something to do with it. But when he's not that guy, he's a different player. Now, he started to get aggressive as the game went on. Maybe he got more confidence. Whatever was happening, he was able to overcome it and be more aggressive. But he's a different player when he's trying to score. So if he stays aggressive on that level, I think the rest of his game comes along. I'm not concerned about Scotty. I'm not worried about Scotty. He does too many things to just look at that right hand of the column in the stat sheet and say, hey, he's not scoring. He can assist, he can rebound, he can defend. We saw it, 8 assists, 8 rebounds in the game. I just think that as a young player, when you're trying to figure it out, and now you got a target on your back. As Rookie of the Year, you're not sneaking up on anybody. You're on the scouting report. Guess what? It becomes difficult to be consistent, and that's a challenge. As a young player, can you be consistent and overcome teams targeting you and still be that great player? That's where they separate themselves. So he has a chance to do that.
And he's been doing it.
He has. I joke with the fan base, people that, you run into them, hey, what's wrong with Scotty? I'm like, hey, well, the rest of the NBA has the internet too. They have cable, they watch, they know how good he is and now what they have to do against him. And it's funny, Sherm was saying that. I noticed that too, and I had somebody text me at the end of the first quarter and said, is Scotty trying to do his impersonation of Ben Simmons by not looking at the basket? And we were just kind of laughing at it.
Unfair.
Totally unfair. But I like the fact that, as Sherm said, he's able to make plays for other people. And once he got going, he's a couple of rebounds, a couple of assists away from a triple-double. I love the fact that he doesn't have to – he can score at all 3 levels. He can score inside, he can score in the mid-range, and he can knock down threes. And I like the fact that he doesn't lean to one or the other. He reads the game, and whatever the game gives him, he'll take it. He'll get on the offensive glass. He'll walk people down and score in the lane. So I'm not, there's a lot of consternation about Scotty and his play and what's wrong. And I just think, we know this. Growth is never linear. It's never linear. It goes up and down, and it's on a different timetable.
And I'll say this. What is he, 21?
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but I was a mess at 21.
He should be in third-year college, right?
I was a mess at 21. So I don't care how good
year.
of a basketball player he is. Inconsistency at that age shouldn't be surprising. Yeah. He's still a human being, and he has life going on, and it's a lot going on. At 21, let's just relax. He's going to be okay.
He's 21 and he can do something for you, but right now we've given you our synopsis of the game. It's time to hear something from the head coach, Nick Nurse, and his thoughts post-game.
What did you see out there?
Yeah, well, obviously it was a bit of a roller coaster game, right? We got off to a great start. Like you said, at the half, they had a big run there with about the last 7 minutes of the half. A lot of what you said, they got out in transition. They got on the glass a little bit too much for us. And then we kind of got all that stuff under control in the second half. I thought it was a little bit unfortunate because we guarded, I thought, really hard and really well, and they made a lot of really tough shots, and we just couldn't quite trade back with them. We were getting some good shots down there, didn't quite make enough of maybe a little better quality shots maybe than they were even getting. And that was really the story of the night.
Yeah, no, but you guys were shooting pretty well as well.
Yeah.
But what did you make of the kind of maybe the level of chippiness or aggression? Is that something that you like from your guys in this one? Because I know it got a little heated out there.
Well, it was, I think, again, both teams were playing pretty hard. And I don't think there was a lot in that, right? I think there was two teams really fighting, competing to win. I mean, geez, bodies were flying and loose balls were active and lots of bodies on the floor and all that kind of stuff. I think it was just really good, strong competition by both teams.
Second night back, Gary has been playing pretty well. What did you see from him?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I thought we were doing a good job, a really good job at times in the game, and especially early on of getting it in and getting it out, right, and it really making the right plays. And he was, the beneficiary of a bunch of that early, and then he, like he does, he created some of his own baskets as well. But yeah, he's looking really confident right now out there as a scorer, and I really liked his aggressiveness on defense too. He had a bunch of, again, a little bit unlucky moment. He got his hands on a ton of balls and didn't recover a couple, and also I thought he had a couple strips that he got called for fouls on too that I thought were good defensive plays by him.
And then what did you make of Fred and especially Precious tonight?
Well, Fred, I thought he played really good defensively. He switched over onto Halliburton there and pretty much in the second half and pretty much took care of, did a really good job on him. Obviously, he didn't shoot it well. And Precious, his first stint was a little shaky, but his second one was really good. He was really active and playing D and on the glass, and it was good to see. I thought he played with great energy, and it was good to see him out there again.
Okay, you heard Nick Nurse there, and we talked about the struggles from the bench, but you can't blame Precious Achiuwa because he missed about 7 weeks of basketball with some torn ligament damage in his ankle. But let's talk about when we can really expect to see the Precious that we saw average around 9 points and 8 rebounds a game like we saw in the first few games of the season. Jonesy, when can you start to expect a reasonable output from Precious?
I don't know if there's a precise timetable you can put on it. It's just how comfortable he starts to feel with game reps.
When can he push off that leg?
Well, I mean, we saw some of it last night. We saw an alley-oop dunk late in the game. I thought Nick put him on Mathurin, and Precious has always said, hey, look, if you want somebody that can turn off the water, I can do that. I just think it's going to take him some time to get some game reps. I mean, 12 minutes, and I don't know if he was on a minute restriction, but there were times when he looked tired out there. So because no matter how much you try to simulate a game, there's nothing like an actual game. So give him some time. I just think the more comfortable he gets, the more game reps he gets, we'll see that. And right away, even in the first game, we saw flashes. The defense running the floor offensively, the rebounding. I don't think it's going to take him too long.
And that's a good thing because it doesn't look like time is on the Raptors' side with the second unit.
No.
Right, and we talk about the bench punch of Indiana. Well, the Raptors need some production off their bench.
Yeah.
And Precious can provide that. And I thought there was a few plays that kind of signified, what Precious can bring to the game and kind of the timing it's going to take for him and his teammates to get back going. Early in the game, OG drove to the basket, and Precious was on the three-point line. Now, he wasn't shooting the three well before he got injured, so instinctually he cuts to the basket, and OG pushes it to the corner and it goes out of bounds. They look at each other. You get it. He hasn't played for a while. Then we saw in the clip of Scotty Barnes getting into the middle of the zone at the free throw line. Precious goes back door. The pass is over the top. Precious is dunking it. So that kind of is relatable to what we're used to seeing from Precious. Also, there's one possession where defensively against Tyrese Halliburton, Precious had him, shot clock winding down, and Tyrese threw the bag at him. And Precious was able to stay in front of him, block the shot, and get the turnover. That type of individual play is something that to me, there's too much gaps in that with the Raptors defense. They have moments where they're phenomenal on the ball. They're tough, they're physical, they protect the paint, they protect the rim, they're in passing lanes, they're creating turnovers, but it's not consistent enough. And that possession for Precious kind of lets you know that he can have moments like that where defensively he can be disruptive, he can be tough, he can be really hard to get by. And as he continues to, get more comfortable, get his wind back, get his repetition and his rhythm back, we hope to see more of those type of performances on the defensive end.
All right, let's transition now from the second unit to the starting lineup, which is a transition that Gary Trent has done after being moved to that second unit. And what's changed for young Gary Trent Jonesy? Because right now, for the last 4 games, averaging, I believe, around 26 points per game, showing some of his best form of recent.
He's locked in offensively. He's found a comfort level offensively, kind of knowing that, knowing where his shots are going to come, and then he starts making them and he starts feeling it. I just think he's a guy that plays well off other people. He's not necessarily going to get his all the time, although he can, but the drive, kick, swing, that kind of stuff. Gary Trent is always a willing finisher on the other end. I mean, we're seeing it here, and he's starting to do more of his work on the defensive end, getting into passing lane. We've seen in the last couple of games, we saw it against Phoenix, we saw it against Indiana, where he'll play a passing lane, and his activity defensively, bang, he gets a steal, and it's a run out, it's an easy basket, and that in general just helps the team because that's the way Toronto wants to play. Force turnovers, get out on the break, all of those kinds of things. So I just think Gary has he's probably reconciled it in his head. All right, this is what my role is, whether I'm coming off the bench or whether I'm starting, and here's how I'm going to have to play. And I think now you saw it in the starting lineup last night. You saw it coming off the bench at times. He just kind of feels more comfortable in his role and knows how he has to play and how he has to play off other people.
Yeah, I think Gary, the key word that comes to me is diversity. In his attack, he's not just giving you 3-point shots. He's getting that pull-up, that sidestep, that step back. He's getting into the paint with the push shot. He's doing so many things. And when everything is clicking like that, a guy he's in his space. He's in his comfort zone. And his catch and shoot is he's loaded. That ball's coming. He's loaded. He's ready to let that thing fly. So when you see a guy have that type of tempo and that type of rhythm to what he's doing, everything that happens is planned. Like, he's executing based on what he knows he can get off. And I think for whatever reason, we talk about it all the time. Doesn't matter if you're a starter. Doesn't matter if you're coming off the bench. Yeah, that's great to say. But some guys are better coming off the bench, and some guys are better in the starting unit. You can debate why it happens. Doesn't matter. They're better in those roles. And Gary Trent Jr. in the starting unit has done a very good job. He was good off the bench, but he's been very good as a starter. And I feel like some of that is contributed to by the fact that from a defensive perspective in the starting unit, you've got a lot of people to deal with. Pascal, Fred, Scotty, OG.
Creates opportunity.
There you go. There's opportunity for him. Now, you want him off the bench because the bench needs punch, but you got to maximize what you're going to get from somebody. And right now, Gary, as a starter, I think Nick Nurse is maximizing everything he can get from Gary Trent Jr. right now. It might change down the road, but as a starter, he's been phenomenal.
All right, well, we started this segment talking about Precious Achiuwa, so we'll end it by hearing from the man himself post-game.
And then obviously, just kind of walking through what you saw out there, throughout the game. You guys had some great offensive moments, but some defensive lapses.
Yeah.
What was it like?
I mean, we just got to lock in on defense. It's not nothing that we haven't done before in the past. Defensively, I think we're a great defensive team. We just got to stay locked in on the defensive end all through, the entire game. And like I said, it's not something that we haven't done before. It's just we're just not focused on the defensive end, and I feel like, as soon as we find that, we're going to be all good.
And then in terms of Gary, this is his second night that he's having a 30-point game. How impressive has he been to you?
I mean, he's been amazing, through all the ups and downs he's had this year, injuries, body not feeling right. It just feels great to see him out there, doing what we used to seeing him doing.
We had another big story in the NBA, of course, and that was an overtime win for the Cleveland Cavaliers and 71-point performance coming from Donovan Mitchell, the big offseason acquisition for that Cavaliers squad. The question I have to pose to you, gentlemen, of course, Sherm, I'll start with you, is will we ever see another 81-point game like the one we got from Kobe Bryant against our very own Toronto Raptors?
I don't know if it'll be against the Raptors, but I think we will see 80 points plus come again. I think the NBA now is kind of designed for offense, and the three-point shooting, the volume of threes that are taken, the whistle being different now.
The weak fouls.
The whistle is different now in terms of contact and what they allow and what they don't allow. There are more free throws when you talk about the amount of flagrants that are called and techs that are called. I think we will see it. It's defensively, this game is not geared towards seeing elite defense win games. It's geared towards seeing a lot of offense, a lot of points, a lot of three-point shots, and that's what it is. So to see Donovan Mitchell do this, it's impressive. I mean, it's the 12th time it's been done. Only 7 players have done it. Wilt did it 6 times.
There's that whole Wilt category.
He did it 6 times.
Yeah.
So, we're talking about a very, very, this should be another award given to Wilt Chamberlain, under his name. But I think it'll happen. I mean, DeMar DeRozan had 44 points in that game, and nobody's talking about it. He had 44.
Luka had 60 just a couple days ago.
It's done. Clay
had 54.
Yeah, it's done. It's going to happen.
I listen, as a guy who sat there and watched every one of Kobe's
I saw it
shots
too.
that night, I think it's going to happen because, first of all, you need the perfect storm. Donovan Mitchell needed every one of those 71 points for his team to win the game.
Come from behind
right?
win.
It's
13 of them came into overtime. Period.
Right? It's not like he's look, before Kobe had 81, 2 weeks before he had 62 after 3 quarters
In Dallas.
They were blowing Dallas out, and Phil Jackson said, "Okay, you're done. We're up by 25." And meanwhile, Kobe wants more. Well, the game has changed. It's built on offense. The three-point shooting, as Sherm said, the rules, all of those things.
And you could come back from down 25 now.
Easily
because of all the possessions and the way the advent of the three-point shot. So I think we're going to see it. And we talked about it a couple weeks ago in here, who could do it. Hey man, a guy like Steph, or last night I watched the highlights of Klay Thompson. He scored his 60 points on 10 dribbles or something like that. So you get a guy like that gets it going one night, you could easily find yourself with an 80-point game. And by the way, Donovan Mitchell accounted for 99 with the scoring and the assists of his team's point.
Damn.
Still not as high as Wilt, who had 104 accounted for in a 70-point game, accounted for 104 of his team's points.
And I will say this. He missed 5 free throws. And if I'm not mistaken, he missed over 5 3-point shots.
Okay.
So there's 81 is not it's
within
right
reach
there.
that night.
Yeah,
it's
Last
right
night.
there.
It could have been 90.
Yeah.
All right, well, we got to move on for the Toronto Raptors, whose next matchup is with the Milwaukee Bucks. We're going to hit the telestrator to see exactly what goes on with the Bucks. And, of course, it starts, Sherm, with a guy they call Giannis Antetokounmpo. And now we're going to talk about him in the pick and roll, which is not something we thought we were going to see a lot of earlier in his career.
Yeah, a little screen there by Connaughton, getting him to his left hand. And if you allow him to break the free throw line with no resistance, it's lights out. Again, the screen is going to come for his left hand. And once he gets a switch now, love Jonas, but Jonas has no chance at moving his feet laterally and staying in front of Giannis, and Giannis blows by him. He's dangerous, and here he becomes the screener, and when he screens, he gets into the paint, and if you don't hit him, present resistance, he's going to dunk it easily, again as a screener with a kickback. Now, this is the ideal scenario. You want to defend him like this. Stay back there and make him make 30 of those threes. If those go in, you live with it. But him rolling to the basket and breaking down off the dribble, it's just too much. His numbers are phenomenal. He's in the MVP conversation. And the fact that Giannis does not shoot the three well is probably the only thing that stops him from getting 70 or 80 points in a game.
If he hits those 30, Sherm, we're talking about a 90-point game.
Oh,
All right, we just talked about how the league doesn't really cater to defense right now, but this Bucks team has two elite defenders. We know Giannis, but also Brook Lopez just moved to number 1 in the NBA Defensive Player of the Year ladder. Let's talk about Brook Lopez, though, and what he's bringing to this team.
Yeah. Just because people don't talk about defense doesn't mean you still don't need it. And this is classic big man. You know, the drop, and he clogs the lane, forces the pass, and then comes over and gets the block. People forget, before he played on the perimeter in Brooklyn, he was an inside guy on the offensive end, and here he is doing it on the defensive end. That's just basically playing goalie, playing the drop defense, saying, okay, you want the jump shot, go ahead. I'm going to stand in the lane and make it difficult for everybody. Blocks the alley-oop here. And then this is something, too. Watch him hustle back on defense and then stand his ground, turn and go vertical against Anthony Davis to get the block. I'm so impressed with Brook Lopez because he has transformed. There's been a metamorphosis in his game from the classic big man when he came into the league, drop step, low post, jump hook, to three-point shooting, but he's never lost that defensive characteristics, the defensive aura of a good inside big man by protecting the rim.
Now, Brook Lopez is now first in the Defensive Player of the Year ladder, as I mentioned earlier, with the NBA. According to some Vegas betting houses, though, he's number 1, followed by Jaren Jackson and Giannis. On that same NBA ladder, Anunoby, OG, a guy you're very familiar with on this Toronto Raptors team, is in second. So here, what's the criteria for OG to get a little bit more respect?
This is something Sherm and I have always talked about way back in the day. I remember us talking about Ron Artest, Andre Kirilenko, those kinds of guys, and the Dikembe Mutombos. Like Brook Lopez is number 1, big man, classic, standing in the lane, protecting the rim, changing shots, having guys look, where is he? And then you got the people like OG.
Dylan Brooks.
They're on the perimeter. Yeah, that's good back there, but if I'm doing this out here, then we don't necessarily need all of that. And a guy like OG he can guard multiple positions, different sizes, and he's also good at the rim at times too. So I just think it's one of those debates, Sherm, like the MVP. It's kind of, what do you value, because there isn't always a metric for everything.
Yeah, the metrics for a block shot is not only the numbers, but it's also vision, right? And there's no hidden sauce in that. It is what it is. The steal has been spoken about and kind of referred to as sometimes
bad defense.
Exactly.
It's a gamble.
There's a little bit of smoke and mirrors in the steal statistics if you take it, but you don't talk about block shots like that. A block shot is a block shot is a block shot. So as a perimeter player, it becomes more difficult. Now, they do have metrics that talk about on-ball defense and things of that nature, but there is a visual and a visceral reaction when you see it happening. When you see a guy physically like OG Anunoby lock into somebody, put his chest on them, and you realize that great offensive player can't go anywhere. Or Dylan Brooks, the physicality he plays with without fouling at times. So that, to me, doesn't really qualify as much into the discussion, but it should.
It should.
It really should. And kudos to the big man. The block shot, really, it's the last line of defense. That's the last thing we remember. Oh, it doesn't matter if it's deflected. It doesn't matter if it was a tough drive to the basket. What we remember is when that shot went up, somebody pasted it on the glass. And that's what's going to get the attention. So big men always will have the advantage, or rim protectors will always have the advantage in that category.
Rudy Gobert has got
I don't think he's getting positive attention right now.
No, but I'm saying, though, look at what he did in Utah, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, your attention should be pasted on Sportsnet tomorrow as the Toronto Raptors take on the very same Milwaukee Bucks, featuring those two defensive stalwarts, and your boy Giannis Antetokounmpo will be in the Scotiabank Arena. That does it for us. We thank you for tuning in, and Happy New Year, everybody.